Welcome to my brand new podcast. You're listening to The Things Nobody Tells You About with Marthy Cherubin. This podcast is about the unspoken things in pregnancy, labor, and postnatal that nobody tells prospective mothers, parents, and or childbearing age women about. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the second part of my pregnancy story. So after I hung up the phone with the ER nurse who called me from the hospital, I called my mom and told her the news. However, I was still a little bit traumatized and speechless by that phone call. I decided that I will give my doctor a call to talk to her about what happened because I wasn't sure if I believed the result completely. I also decided to wait before I tell my husband because I'm not sure if I'm 100% pregnant at this point. So, first thing, Monday morning, I called my doctor. She told me that I should probably take another pregnancy test since I'm not sure about the result that I got from the hospital. She also mentioned that I need to make an appointment with my OBGYN. Since I had no idea how I was supposed to find a good and trustworthy OBGYN, I started to panic a little bit. So the doctor gave me a couple of referrals, including her own OBGYN that she had when she gave birth to her twins. As recommended, I took another pregnancy test, and lo and behold, it says not pregnant. However, I decided to call the OBGYN anyway because I don't know if it's a false negative or if the test at the hospital was a false positive. After talking to all the OBGYNs that were recommended, I decided to go with my primary care physician, former OBGYN. I called the OBGYN office to make an appointment and tell them what happened. The nurse at the OBGYN office told me to wait until I actually missed my period to take another pregnancy test. Then she scheduled an 8-week appointment for me to come in so that they can do an ultrasound. Thankfully, after a very anxious couple of weeks of waiting and praying to hopefully miss my period, I took a pregnancy test. And it was positive. Yay! I felt so relieved because now I can tell my husband that I'm pregnant. After my pregnancy was finally confirmed, it continued to feel weird and uneventful until I was about 5 months pregnant. It literally felt like there was an alien living inside of my body and I was its human host. Around 5 months pregnant, I ended up in the hospital because of something that I later learned was Braxton Hicks syndrome or symptoms, and I was also diagnosed with dehydration. It really scared me because prior to my diagnosis, I thought that I was going into labor at 5 months or I was about to lose my baby. I learned that Braxton Hicks syndrome or symptoms are sporadic contractions and relaxation of the uterine muscle, and they are usually felt around your second or third trimester of pregnancy. They are also referred to as false labor pains. I also found out I was supposed to drink 3 liters of water a day, which nobody told me about, not even my doctor. There were a few other things that happened throughout my pregnancy that nobody told me about. I started spotting, which is defined as light bleeding that happens outside of your regular periods. I developed hypothyroidism, which is a condition that is caused by an underactive thyroid gland. It can also be a cause of miscarriage. And to make matters worse, a small fibroid started to grow inside of my uterus. It did not stop there. My feet started to grow, my nose spread, I became very forgetful, and I started to snore very, very loudly. A couple of weeks before my delivery date, the baby was breech, and I had no idea what that meant until my doula explained it to me. Right before birth, most babies are in a head first position in the mother's uterus. Sometimes the baby is in the bottom first or feet first position or sideway. This is what they call a breech baby. And if the baby is not turned, a cesarean or a C-section will be scheduled to take the baby out of the womb. Thankfully, my doula referred me to a chiropractor and an acupuncturist who specialize in helping turn breech babies before birth. And it worked. When I went to my next doctor's appointment, they saw that the baby turned and the doctor canceled the scheduled C-section. Since I wanted to have a natural birth, I was very happy about the fact that I didn't have to have a C-section. I wanted to give birth to my baby without any drugs or medication. For those of you who don't know, a doula is a support person, usually female, with no medical or midwifery training, who provides a continuous source of comfort, encouragement, and support, both emotional and physical, to a mother or pregnant couple before, during, and after childbirth. A doula may also act as a mediator and an advocate who's there to run interference with hospital personnel, as well as translate medical terms and explain procedures. Together with the doula, I created a birth plan for myself and the baby, which I used to tell my doctors what I want for myself and my baby throughout my labor and delivery. Why did I hire a doula? I hired a doula for a few reasons. One, I wanted to have someone else in the room besides my husband who can provide ongoing support throughout my labor and delivery. Two, this is our first pregnancy, labor, and delivery, so we don't really know exactly what to expect. So we wanted somebody there with experience to guide us through the process. Three, I definitely wanted somebody who would act as my advocate and who would run interference with the nurses and doctors. As we learned in the last episode, Black women are systematically ignored and neglected by the nurses and doctors when they go to the hospital. And if Serena Williams, the tennis superstar, the greatest of all time, the baddest chick in the game, and a multimillionaire, almost died after giving birth, it doesn't matter how rich you are or how educated you are, if you are a black woman, you are at risk. So you best believe that I was not going to roll up in that hospital without backup. So I got me a doula. Overall, despite all of the things that happened throughout my pregnancy, I had a pretty positive experience. And the reason that I did is because I made sure that I stayed positive no matter what. I listened to classical music. I stayed away from toxic people. I stopped listening to the news. I only watch comedies, whether it's a sitcom or a movie. And I tried to listen to my body as much as possible. For example, I found that apples are great for nausea and heartburn. So I would eat 3 to 4 apples a day, especially the first and second trimester, and the nausea and heartburn will go away. And I never really vomited. I only threw up 3 times throughout my whole pregnancy because I ate something despite feeling repulsed by the smell. So whenever I do not like the smell of something, I don't eat it, because if I do, it's gonna make me throw up. We are going to stop here for today, folks, but please come back next week for my labor story. And remember to leave a review of this episode on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can also leave a comment about your pregnancy stories, because you might even hear your review and or your stories on the air. So please join us.